Welcome back, and we are in conversation with Vitalik Buterin. Vitalik, thank you so much, and we have had so much information from you, but tell us on how India stands, as when it comes to the use of digital currencies. There are various other ways. I mean, you have online transactions, you have e-wallets, and you have RuPays and stuff like that. Digital currency, do you see that having competition with these other venues?
As a medium of exchange, like, it depends. I mean, it's definitely the case that for a lot of just simple person-to-person payment applications, there already are plenty of very good existing options, and you don't necessarily need cryptocurrencies. You know,
I've heard more people investing into digital currencies rather than using it for transactions.
That's what I was going to say, right? You have these two functions of currency, where one is using it as a medium of exchange, and one is using it as a store of value. And in a lot of places, the store of value angle is actually getting much more traction than the medium of exchange angle, right? Because the reason is that if you want to make a good medium of exchange, then lots of people have to accept it. You need to make sure that it's easy to use. You need to make sure that the on and off ramps work well, make sure the software works well, make sure like security and user interface issues are all handled. But if you're looking at just the store of value, it's, especially in the early stages, it's actually fairly easy, because even if there's only 100 people that are using some cryptocurrency, if you think that there's some chance that 1 million people will be using it 20 or 30 years later, then that's already enough of a story to invest in it, right? So, like, whereas with the medium of exchange use case, like with a lot of applications on the internet, you have this network effects problem that, like, it's useless unless everyone else is already using it, and why would everyone else use it if it's useless? But with the store value is a bit more of a kind of antisocial thing. Like, you don't really need to like store value with people. You just kind of store value. But
coming to the other side, the transaction side, how are the transactions settled? Is there a transaction fees? Is it documented? How does that work?
So on the transaction side, right, so there are merchants that accept it. As far as use cases that I think are interesting, international payments is a big one, making payments to contractors, just paying for things. Like, there have been times when I had to book a plane ticket and both of my credit cards just stopped working, and, Bitcoin, fortunately, never stops working. No one can take it away from you.
I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah, so, thanks to Bitcoin, I actually managed to get the plane tickets booked. So, like, there are use cases. I mean, in terms of how it works, right, basically you have a Bitcoin wallet, and if you want to send someone money, they give you this string of letters and numbers that's a Bitcoin address, and you can think of it as kind of like a digital phone number, except you send money to it. And you would create this transaction, you would kind of cryptographically sign it. It's this kind of operation that you do on your computer or on your phone. Then transaction gets sent onto the internet, and then the Bitcoin network kind of processes it. Now, if you want your transaction to get processed, you do need to attach a transaction fee. And the idea is that this transaction fee kind of goes to the nodes in the network. And, I mean, there definitely is a concern with Bitcoin particularly that basically because there's a fairly low kind of hard limit on the number of transactions the Bitcoin network can process like every 10 minutes, because of that, basically there's already more people that want to send transactions than there is space. And so, there's this bit of a kind of supply crunch, and, transaction fees have been shooting up quite a lot recently. Yeah, so, like, that's like that's like one concern, for example, and maybe Bitcoin will be able to increase its capacity, or maybe people will start looking to other cryptocurrencies as alternatives if transactions become cheaper to send on them.
So while we understand that it is universally, it has recognition at universal level, but do you see it anywhere closer to replacing my credit or debit cards, or do you think we are the way away from that yet?
I mean, I don't think we'll see it outright replacing credit and debit cards. I think we'll just see it emerging as one payment option among many, right? So, like, if you look at China, for example, you have cash, you have WeChat payments, you have Alipay, credit and debit cards still exist, and you now basically just have 5 ways of paying people instead of 3. So I think we'll see like cryptocurrencies kind of grow more and more and just become a more and more accepted means of paying people. And we'll see people accepted in those areas that make sense. And if at least in the kind of medium of exchange case it ends up getting more of a network effect, then the number of use cases might end up growing.
Oh, how have you seen the awareness level since you travel so much from country to country? Are people ready to accept it, invest into it, transact into it? What are the awareness levels that you have come across?
It's rapidly increasing, I think. Like, in general, like these days, when I go to pretty much any country, there's at least like 100 or 200 people that are like willing to listen to, you know, what I have to say about like smart contracts and blockchain applications, which definitely was not the case 2 or 3 years ago. Right? Like
in India, I understand the number is 50,000 people who have some access to Bitcoin one way or the other.
Yeah, look, in Ethereum, right, the total number of like accounts is about 800,000. Okay. Now, obviously, like accounts are pretty much free to create, and so there's people that probably have 5 or 10 accounts, but that just gives you an idea, and some of them are not even used anymore, but that still gives you an idea of about how many people there are using Ethereum. And, you know, in the case of Bitcoin, you can look up the statistics too. Like,
so is that a plus point, really, the anonymity and...
I mean, it's important to note that anonymity for like Bitcoin or Ether is not perfect, right? Even though with Bitcoin or you know, Ethereum, like the two systems in this regard are basically the same, there's no link between the transaction you send or the address that you use and your physical real-world identity.
Okay.
You can still make links between one transaction and the other, right? So if I have 100 Bitcoins and I send, you know, you 10 of them, and then I have 90 Bitcoins, and then I send 10 to someone else. Okay. Like, people can look at the public ledger, and they can see there was this transaction, there was this transaction, they're linked to each other, they're probably sent by the same person, right? And then over time, as people keep sending these transactions, you know, there have been already computer scientists that have made these like fancy like graph isomorphism analyses, like various other kinds of checks. And basically what these checks do is they can look at this kind of graph of, you know, who's sending money to whom and when, combine it together with like the graph of what they know about the real world, and they can just like match up identities to like Bitcoin addresses, at least in kind of very prominent cases.
Sure.
Right.
Talk to us also about the crypto millionaires. I mean, there have been so many articles onto that one. There's a market cap to it. There's a limited availability of you know, the Ethereum or Bitcoins or digital currencies for that matter. How does that work, and how much money really has been made by the...
I mean, if you look at market caps, Bitcoin is at 12 billion. Ether has been like between, you know, 500 million and 1.5 billion for the last 8 months or so. So there's definitely people that, I mean, have quite a lot of one or the other or both. It's, you know, I think what we're going to see next, though, is, I mean, obviously, cryptocurrencies themselves are going to continue growing, but we're also starting to see the rise of really interesting blockchain applications. So, you know, people are building like various kinds of like financial contracts or like peer-to-peer insurance systems, prediction markets, like markets for computation. So imagine kind of like Airbnb for your hard drive. So there's lots of these interesting things that are being built on top of Ethereum, and a lot of these applications actually even end up having their own tokens. And, you know, these tokens themselves are like on the market, and they have a value. And so there's that aspect to it too. Although, like, the thing that I'm actually most excited about is actually seeing some of these applications start kind of maturing and getting users and starting to actually really be useful to people.
You know, the other thing really is about the valuations of this. We understand there's a limited market cap to it, as you mentioned, and there's a limited availability of it also. But with more and more digital currencies coming in, do you think that just about then liquidates it, or rather dilutes it?
Not necessarily. I mean, people do say sometimes, oh, it would be so much better if we could just band together and make a single blockchain. But, like, you know, you could also say, oh, it would be so much better if we just band together and make a single company, right? Why don't we just all join Microsoft and just, like, let Microsoft produce, you know, every product in the world? And, you know, the answer is, you know, there's very good economic reasons why you have economies of scale, and you also have diseconomies of scale.
I get that point of yours. And as you mentioned, big companies, we understand that these big companies also are coming on board. They're investors in one digital currency or the other. So in that sense as well, do you see that catching up?
Definitely. And the large companies have been definitely getting interested over the last couple of years. I mean, in general, they are much more interested in blockchain applications than they are in, like, trading or investing in cryptocurrencies themselves. But you know, we have Microsoft, which actually has been making like a kind of software as a service platform, like, you know, on top of their cloud offerings for Ethereum and for other blockchain platforms.
Lovely.
There's
so you know, my final question to you, Vitalik, is going to be on, as you said, the first Bitcoin came in 2009. Ethereum is like 2-3 years older now. But where do you see this digital currency going if you had to put it next 5 years or 10 years to it?
I think there's several different kind of threads that are moving forward at the same time and that kind of depend on each other. So one of those threads is just individual applications getting more and more adoption and eventually finding some kind of mainstream use.
Okay.
So whether it's like peer-to-peer insurance or these Airbnb for your hard drive type of applications or digital identity or whatever else, like they all have their own paths. Then another one is the development of the underlying technology itself. So there are still a lot of challenges in making blockchains work well, like scalability, privacy are two of the major big ones. Security is another one.
Sure.
And look, I would say blockchains, you know, Ethereum is good enough right now for many kinds of applications, like the kinds that might either not have too many users or only require people to send a message once every, you know, a couple of months.
But what's the percentage increase of people that you see coming into this?
I mean, potentially it could be massive, right? And like if blockchains are kind of as transformative as, you know, the proponents are saying they are, then that would imply that eventually we'll see hundreds of millions of people using it in some way or another, and that's necessarily going to imply a lot of expansion.
All right, so that is the rise of digital currency that we are expecting. Vitalik, thank you so much for coming by in our studios and talking to us and giving us all that information about the digital currencies going forward. With that, that's all that time that we have on the show. Thank you for watching.